Flowers pollen because what oil and clay does is vitamin based. So those two things together, you could imagine what could happen in the world. So then 2 more factions. A bush and quicksand. Like a really good flower, you need to know the most dangerous flowers so you can better characterize it. And with quicksand, I'm gonna make it be a lot of different variety of it. Imagine a quicksand that had clay in it, and the clay was part oil as well. What might be accounting in it as oil can heat up if it's being fracking, if it's being undergoing a fracking. Might a bush have if it is very, very thick? The allegory of the jewels is our rights, our nation. There's like these hairless mole rats, and they have a queen rat, and the queen rat is like the queen bee for bees, or the queen ant for ants, and they like disassociate and get out of whack if the queen's killed. If our judicial system with our president, so if I get sand or snow in my shoe and then I throw it out of my shoe by taking it off, is that like a DNA formation? Instead of a helix, is that like a circle with like spikes in it, or little bridges? DNA is a basic constituent, and it's been read differently. Break it down, it is going to explain the body that it makes up. Nuclear. And back to continuity and excitation. The excitation of a flower and continuity can be like disorganized as like the flower can be bendy. And then, just because the flower has a bendy stem, it doesn't mean that all of those flowers have bendy stems. But if you're looking at, like a stinky flower, or a flower that carries disease a lot, like a trash man might carry a lot of disease as it's driven around. Flowers that bend pick up more likely disease, not because of its genetic, but because of its excitation. So that would be an easy way you would confuse a flower's continuity. Maybe if it's a poisonous flower, it would be the continuity of that, besides the excitation being minimal, if it was a flower that had a disease on it or a bad bacteria, which is the same. Or is it? What's the relation between a bad disease or a bad bacteria? Is it kind of like how you can eat DNA from food, but then you have DNA that is you? Using different flowers, you can see different intricacies of the earth and be referencing, cross-reference for very apparent actual information. So I've noticed that the snow, when it's drying up, it's dissolving and it forms that specific structure. It's just all the snow all around is doing that. Flower, like in those nature videos when they show a flower opening it up over its lifespan. So if you mimic like the whole world as like a flower and just represent like the petals as like the capacitance plates and the magma core as like the flower's photosynthesis process, that would be a great way to represent the blooming of a flower and then the health of the earth. And when it's distanced at length, you see more of this type of stuff. For example, like dividends in the ground. The more you go away, you see that there's canyons in a lot of different ways. And the snow, when it's melting, it adds up as these little like towers of the crystal. And you see this in the structures. It's kind of interesting that Joe Rogan had a podcast and he said that this one alien shot a beam and it made an excitation of like a specific mineral that looked kind of in the same formation as that. And so that's a basic constituent of nature and one of its laws of thresholds. But it's frequent if you're observant. So how many more things are observant if you're frequent of it? And I learned the water cycle, and more I keep thinking of like these boundaries and in nature and what's true and isn't. The air you breathe supposedly has been breathed by Einstein because it's recycled atoms. The moon you look at, the sun you look at, is the same moon and sun that Cleopatra in Egypt looked at. These things are interesting because it's all in this closed system. I'm scared of peeing on a grave if the water is recycled into the sewage, which is brought up into the atmosphere, rains down. Call me crazy, but the rain to me doesn't taste as clean as it used to. This became apparent when I had a phone call from Contact Tracer asking me questions about people who might have been sick around me. So by having all the jewels and controlling the destiny, you would ask, how does that happen? It happens by not knowing the continuity and how excitement works. So while I was trying to bang in the idealism of nature has the rules, goes as the following. What's the difference between like a drug and food? And then trying to understand that difference is like when you eat DNA of a food, how is that different than the DNA in your body if it's both in your body? Then they say you are what you eat. To what extent? And so the enzymes and the ions, all this stuff is in accordance of how your DNA was first made. And so is that resonating the laws of nature of how not to get sick? Because once you do get sick, now there's sanctions saying that you need to be watched. The wave function does that to any particle. It's attached to it in that, like a shadow to the floor. When someone would say, sweep the shadow off the ground, it's the same thing as make that particle stick to the wave. It already is. People are odd because nothing is perfect, but it's the misconstruing that is problematic. I feel comfortable walking anywhere in this arena because there isn't wetness of the snow dripping all over the pavement. Because the pavement has been tempered with salt. So if you took a lick of this concrete, I'm sure that you would taste some salt. There's some white streaming line to better sanctify that depiction.